Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albiam Corner, Amy Nicole-Turner, Alex Armstrong and Reem Ibrahim. Tonight on the show, Lawrence Fox's victory for truth.
Those calling for the UK to pay slavery reparations are wrong. The UK shouldn't pay a penny of reparations.
Are we edging closer than Section 28 than ever before?
Should we be sending foreign aid to countries with space programmes?
And why the government needs to take responsibility for the childcare cost conundrum.
It's 8 o'clock and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5, and despite the best efforts of Mick Lynch and the RMT to ruin yet another summer weekend, we have all made it into the studio and we're on track to deliver another hour of heated debate. Benjamin Butterworth is completing a well-deserved 2-week suspension for taking the knee on the show earlier this month, and Emily is attending her 10th wedding of the summer. But not to worry, Albie's present and correct, and we're also joined by broadcaster, author and the wokest woman on the Dan Wooten Show, Amy Nicole-Turner.
I'm taking that as a compliment.
Yes, fearless political commentator Alex Armstrong, and when she's not keeping them in order at the Institute of Economic Affairs, she's a brilliant broadcaster and commentator. It's Reem Ibrahim. Each host gets 60 seconds to outline their argument about a chosen topic, and then we all pile in and it gets sassier than Donald Trump's mugshot. And of course, we want to know your views as well. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it's your Saturday night news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Tory MP Nadine Dorries has resigned her common seat, accusing the Prime Minister of demeaning his office by opening the gates to whip up a public frenzy against her. In her resignation letter, Ms Dorries accused Mr Sunak of abandoning the fundamental principles of conservatism, and she said history will not judge you kindly. Well, she declared in June that she would leave her mid-Bedfordshire seat with immediate effect. But despite this, she went on to try to find out why she was refused a seat in the House of Lords. It was thought she'd get a peerage in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. She'd been coming under pressure to step down since June. Most of Spain's coaching staff has resigned following the conduct of Luis Rubiales at last weekend's Women's World Cup final. Rubiales is currently suspended by FIFA from all football-related activities as he's accused of grabbing star player Jenny Hermoso's head and kissing her on the lips following Spain's victory against England in the World Cup. He said it was a spontaneous and consensual little peck and said false feminists were trying to kill him. A statement from the coaches said he offered a story that does not reflect in any way the feelings of Jenny, who stated she felt the victim of aggression. The RMT union says a roadmap to a negotiated settlement could bring an end to the ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Today's train strikes, continuing for a second year, come as many people head off on their summer holidays or even travel to events such as Notting Hill Carnival. Assistant General Secretary of the RMT union, Eddie Dempsey, says the government's modernisation plans are not in the interests of passengers.
What we're seeing now is the centrepiece of the government's modernisation plans, which we've been warning about for a long time, is the closure of every ticket office in the country and the de-staffing of the railway, dehumanisation of the railway. And their plans around this are not to improve things for the passengers, are not because we've all suddenly become networked and modern and don't need to interact with other humans. This is purely about ensuring profits for the private companies that have got a stake in our railways now continue to flow. And we think this is just one part of what we regard as the managed decline of Britain.
And finally, the deputy head of the British Museum stepping aside while a police investigation into stolen artefacts is underway. The museum's head, Hartwig Fischer, resigned yesterday, and an unnamed member of staff has also been sacked. It's understood that the items, which include gold jewellery and semi-precious stones, were taken over a significant period of time. Former Chancellor George Osborne, who's now the museum's chairman, says some of the items have already been recovered. He's promised an independent review to look into how the museum missed the warning signs. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to the Saturday 5.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes. India may have sent a spacecraft to the moon this week, but I'm about to attempt something far harder. Keeping this lot in order for the next hour. Let's crack on with tonight's first debate.
Our colleague Lawrence Fox has been the subject of media controversy this week, and Darren Grimes has been cheering him on from the sidelines. It's time for Grime Time.
Absolutely. So, today's logic, folks. Setting fires is apparently now climate change. Wanting secure borders? Clearly racist. Biological definitions don't seem to matter anymore. Women can have a penis. Britain played a pivotal role in ending the slave trade, and now we apparently owe reparations. That's what they say. And it's totally acceptable to question an election result, only if it involves Brexit or Hillary Clinton. The phrase post-truth era has become something of a modern mantra, often championed by the very same lot peddling the most questionable narratives. Lawrence Fox, once beloved actor, now GB News presenter, became a casualty of this madness. He dared to challenge the sweeping notion that all white people are inherently racist. In the heated back and forth, he flung a wild accusation of paedophilia back at his accusers. Fast forward to the courtroom, and Lord Justice Warby of the Court of Appeal clarified that Fox's retort, albeit containing the term paedophile, wasn't meant to be taken at face value. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that we all hurl such accusations, but I can totally emphasise and understand the frustration. The narrative for years has been the constant demonisation of anyone who dares reject the portrayal of Britain and its citizens as some unique global evil. Let's not forget Fox's statement on BBC Question Time, the very show that curtailed his acting pursuits but catapulted him into political activism. He remarked, "We're the most tolerant, lovely country. But in today's climate, where emotions outweigh facts, such truths become controversial. That's why it's heartening to me to see glimpses of a justice system that hasn't wholly surrendered to this new age radical ideology. Alex, I want to start with you. Now, you must be of the view that this is a good thing. I mean, how many times have you been accused of such things? It's not paedophilia.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's just clarify that point, Darren. But, you know, it is a good thing. And the freedom of speech in this country has been eradicated by the left over a long period of time, and they've been getting away with it for a long time without actually being challenged. Now, people like myself have been thrown back into politics because we've seen the state of our freedom of speech and gone, well, this isn't quite what Britain's all about, is it? So I'm really happy that this is a nice first step in recovering what has been lost.
Is it that, though, or is it just wealthy people quibbling and it getting dismissed at the expense of a lot of money for one man?
Well, I think that it's important that whether it's wealthy people quibbling or not, that the debate takes place. I'll use Nigel Farage's bank account being closed as an example. If it hadn't happened to Nigel, we wouldn't be talking about people's bank accounts being frozen. So, yes, it's maybe some wealthy people squabbling over some comments. However, the premise of their argument is extremely important.
At the same time, we're locking down on protests, making it harder than ever for people to have freedom of speech, putting people in prison for just saying their opinions on the street. So I'm not sure that this is a victory of freedom of speech.
If people are gluing their behind to the road, then they're getting arrested.
Well, they're not even getting the chance to do that now, are they?
Well, yes, but they're not getting arrested for their speech. They're getting arrested for blocking a road.
But Darren,
you must have been
blocking
quite chilled during the coronation when some people they thought were anti-monarchy protesters were arrested for no apparent reason. Surely, as someone who believes in free speech and freedom of expression, that should concern you and everyone on this panel.
Well, look, I think in that moment, you know, I don't know what the police intelligence was saying. I have absolutely no background
clearly
on
wrong.
that. Well, that's a...
And an innocent woman got put in prison
themselves. You know, I'm not here as a representative of His Majesty's police force, but I am here as someone that gets accused of being racist, of being some kind of swivel-eyed bigot, all because I voted and campaigned for Brexit, and I absolutely do not have any regrets about that whatsoever.
And I think that both of those things can be true. We can sort of look at the justice system and actually say that the fact that freedom of expression is being recognised as an important part of our democracy, that's good. And equally, the fact that the protest bill is still being implemented and that people are being preemptively arrested before they even try to protest, both of those things can be true and we can condemn both of them.
Have you ever heard of the phrase, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind? I don't know whether or not Lawrence's response by calling someone a paedophile is just fuelling the fire of this gutter debate and awful way that we're debating in politics nowadays. And actually, maybe we should be trying to rise above these issues, just to drag down the whole tone of debate by being as bad as the people who are starting it.
I do agree with that point, but I might add, the silence has been what has led to this in the first place. People going, I'm going to rise above it. Well, there's only so many times you should rise above something before you go, actually, I'm going to make a stand. I'm not necessarily we should go around calling people paedophiles, but I am saying you should fight back and go, surely, you are getting away with calling me something that's not true.
People on the left...
Will it work if I do it? Back to you. And the reality is that, you know, the left were hurt by what he said, and therefore he was the one that was taken to court, not the comments that were made about him. What does that tell you about
people on the left should not be calling people racist, homophobic and transphobic for no reason. And then their opponents should not be calling people paedophiles.
No, but my point is...
I think it sullies
the reality
debate
is that
for everyone.
The reality is that the left are calling the right racist and homophobic and transphobic.
So what does the right calling people paedophiles back do for the situation?
Look, it was a tactic that Lawrence Fox used. Whether you agree with it or not, I think it's an entirely separate issue.
But for Lawrence to make the jump that the judge was commenting on critical race theory simply isn't true. The judge dismissed it as opinion. So it's a jump.
Well, the judge said that it wasn't, you know, it's clearly not the case that he was actually intending to call someone a paedophile.
But he also didn't comment in the way that Lawrence did on critical race theory.
But I think it brings into question, though, the wider debate of all Lawrence said on Question Time was that actually this is quite a nice and tolerant country.
And he was right to say that.
So you must accept that it's unfair for him to be dismissed in the way he has.
I think the way Lawrence has been treated by Hollywood and that whole kind of world has been appalling. I just don't know that the response is to be as horrible back to the people that were horrible to Lawrence.
And
that's
really
all.
Quite
I just think we've lost a sense of being polite and having manners, and I wish more people had good manners in politics. Whatever
Well, I
happened to
certainly love
manners?
good manners, Albie, but I do not like being called a racist. I don't like being called homophobic, and I get those comments constantly. And if I'm going to sit there and rise above them all the time, well, they get away with it. Where does the turning point happen?
You have to fight
That's
back.
the question. We do have to fight back.
Well, I'm
and
a
the
big
British
believer
public
in fighting back. I mean, I'm sure the audience know that by now, me and my big mouth. But anyway, up next, it's Albie, and Albie's going to argue that it's not reparations that post-colonial nations need, but a dose of decent government and stop the foreigner blame game. Off you go, Albie.
Calls for reparations to be paid reached fever pitch this week when a UN judge suggested that £18 trillion, yes, you heard it, £18 trillion wasn't enough for the UK to pay back the debt for all of the nations that were pummeled during the slave trade. Now, I think that is complete nonsense. The UK shouldn't be paying a penny in reparations, and here's why. Post-colonial African and Caribbean nations aren't impoverished because of slavery. They're primarily in the mess that they're in because of corrupt politicians and bad decisions made post-independence. Let's look at two post-colonial success stories. Singapore has become one of the most prosperous countries in the world, even more prosperous than many of the former colonial powers that colonised most of the world. Let's take India, for example. This year, it became the world's 6th biggest economy. It sent a spacecraft to the moon, and it's also the world's biggest democracy. How does that fit in with the argument that colonialism is the cause of all of these countries' problems when there are many post-colonial nations which are thriving, Singapore and India, just to name a few? Now, has colonialism had a lasting legacy for both good and bad? Of course it has. But is the bad the sole reason that these countries are struggling both socially and economically? No, of course not. Let's say the people calling for reparations to be paid are right, like the Guyanese president. Let's say they are right. Who should be paying the reparations and who should be receiving the reparations? Is he seriously arguing that modern-day British taxpayers, who have absolutely nothing to do with the slave trade, should be paying modern-day people in formerly colonised countries who similarly have nothing to do with slavery because of things which happened centuries ago? It's total nonsense. Whatever next? Should Britain be demanding reparations from Sweden for the Viking conquest or from France for the Norman conquest? Of course not. Britain is already one of the biggest donors in global international aid. It's a fundamental part of our budget every year, a Conservative policy that I'm very proud of. We seem to have got to a place in the world where we want quick and easy solutions for problems. And the simple fact of the matter is, we can't solve our social or economic problems, whether here in Britain, in Africa, or in the Caribbean, with quick, simple solutions. And that's why I say those who are calling for reparations and blaming slavery for the problems of countries today are just providing a convenient excuse for failure. Amy Nicole, I sense that you might not agree with what I've said. Do you think that there is actually a point for these people that are saying that colonialism has left a really bad legacy? If we look at the Berlin Conference, which carved up Africa into many different nations, not really taking into account different cultures, languages, some people argue that is why Africa's in the mess that it's in. Do you think that there is actually more to it than what I've said?
You simply cannot compare all the colonisation nations as if they are one homogenous group. Singapore was used as a trading port. The Caribbean was founded solely because of slavery, to be used by slaves to send produce back. Its very existence is because of the wrongs of slavery. So, of course, the legacies are going to be completely different, added to the fact that you have the debts that the UK has given out to Africa, to the Caribbean since slavery ended.
But now they're taking out debt with China, which has got even worse terms. I mean, let's look at India, for example. Similarly, partitioned in a similar way to Africa, the partition of India was one of the worst atrocities that was caused by the British Empire. Millions of people died, and yet India is thriving.
The reason you're never going to run away from this, and I think it is an inevitability that reparations will happen from the US, from the UK in a matter of time, is because you've got 200 years of free labour that needs to be paid for.
Darren Grimes,
we compensated the slave owners until 2015, so there's a debt, and that debt needs to be paid, and it will be paid.
We did, but Darren Grimes, are reparations inevitable, as Amy says? Where is £18 trillion going to come from? That's bigger than the UK economy by a few multiples.
Well, we'll all be living in caves and eating stewing grass to sustain ourselves. You know, over my dead body, I'm willing to put myself down on that floor and, you know...
Don't do it now.
I'm not going to do a Benjamin Butterworth and get down on... But look, I think it actually reinforces victim narratives to parts of the world that are just making excuses. I'm sorry.
Is a victim narrative. The whole...
No, it's not. What has Britain done in my lifetime?
I think that what's fundamentally true.
In my lifetime.
You've been paying reparations to the slave owners until 2015.
But that was a fundamental part of why Britain ended the slave trade. Reem Ibrahim, what's your response to what Amy's been saying?
So I think that fundamentally, when we're looking at countries like Singapore, like India, when they have opened up their countries to free trade, to open markets, we have seen them get even richer than even some of their colonisers. So fundamentally, when we're thinking about the differences, and Amy makes a good point, there are differences in the way that these countries were used during the periods that they were colonised. However, when those countries open up to open trade, to freedom of expression, to better democracy or better, more sound governments, then we do see those countries thrive. And I think Singapore was a fantastic example of that. They've got a better healthcare system than us because they've been able to introduce more free markets.
They also have no foreign debt, whereas the Caribbean and Africa are entrenched.
I'm interested in what Alex Armstrong has to say on this, because you often get called a culture war warrior. So are you getting so angry at these people calling for reparations, like Amy Nicole Turner over here?
Look, I think the whole debate is ridiculous, and I'll tell you why. Because throughout human history, slavery has happened, and do you know what the biggest problem with this debate is? Is that there are more modern slaves today than there ever have been slaves on boats. Now, nobody on the left wants to talk about that. They constantly want to drag up the past, but they don't want to tackle how many millions of modern slaves exist around the world today.
I think we do want to talk about modern slavery, which is one of the reasons we want to stay in the ECHR.
But Amy, look, the problem is that you will always have someone calling for reparations if we continue on this point.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're going to have to end it there, but still to come tonight, Amy is annoyed about the reaction to the latest release by a popular children's author, and Alex is angry about the money we've given to the space pioneers, India. But next, we'll be living the Reem as she tells us why the childcare crisis is all of the government's making. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Kate says, well done, Lawrence Fox. He's taken a stand for all the sensible people around. My only question is, when will we see him back on GB News? Now, my producers could probably going to tell me that. I think he's back next week, actually. But I could be wrong. He'll be back shortly, though. I promise you that, Kate. But Teresa says, on the entire planet and potentially the solar system, there is not a person who talks more rubbish than Lawrence Fox. That was a hollow court victory if ever I heard one. Well, she didn't hold back there, did she?
That was me.
That was you. Now it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's Reem, and Reem thinks the government are to blame for the childcare crisis. It's high time that we lived the Reem.
Well, childcare this week is another hot political topic yet again. This week, the Children and Families Minister Claire Coutinho blamed landlords and other stakeholders for putting up childcare costs. They've blamed them for effectively saying that actually they've been restricting the number of childminders. We saw the number of childminders reduced from about 100,000 in the mid-1990s to a whopping 30,000 today. But are landlords really to blame? I think that the government need to actually look in the mirror themselves and think about how they've been the cause of high childcare costs. We've got some of the most stringent childcare regulations in Europe, and actually if we were to mirror some of those European child-to-staff ratios, we could see childcare costs reduced by about 40%. Looking at Norway as a particular example, they've got much lower childcare regulations than we do, and their costs are much lower. We've also got the sort of statutory framework that they have for under 5-year-olds. The government have implemented that back in 2006. It's effectively a curriculum for under 5-year-olds. Now, I don't think that under 5-year-olds need to have a particular curriculum. What that means is that childminders have to sort of give those kind of detailed reports. That effectively means that those that have English as a second language or those that are less well educated are effectively barred from being able to become childminders. The government need to stay out of childcare and instead implement a voucher system so that every parent is able to choose where they get their childcare from. When it comes to childcare, the government have been a bunch of dummies.
Oh, yes.
Why didn't you put it in your mouth, Reem?
I could have put it in my mouth. Albie, what do you think? Do you think that childcare costs are really sort of fundamentally the government's fault, or do you think that we just spend more of our government money?
Look, I think I would be a little bit concerned when you say the government needs to get out of childcare, because that suggests that childcare shouldn't be regulated at all, and I don't think that's the argument you're making. So I think I probably wouldn't have used those words. Obviously, we want there to be regulations in childcare to keep our children, our babies safe. So it is important, but not too much regulation. I think that's the problem. I think it's both an issue of government and actually what the public want. The government are swayed by public opinion, and sometimes the public like regulation?
I think it's fundamentally about what parents can do. And I think that parents are clever enough to make the decisions for themselves about what kind of caring and safe environment is best for their children. At the moment, the government are artificially increasing costs, and I think that's fundamentally what the problem is.
But I think one place I would also disagree with you on is the curriculum for under 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know, we're getting people going to reception now where they can't even hold pens properly, they're not potty trained, you know, these basic things which are needed for children to excel in school. And I think that actually should be stipulated from government.
The early years is the most critical time to prep you for the education system completely. And
I agree with that, but what are the parents doing?
But the parents can't afford
Not
childcare.
enough. The parents can't afford to teach their child to hold a pen.
The parents are staying at home and can't
giraffe.
afford to send their kids to... we have the highest childcare costs in the world, and the government needs to subsidise childcare more because they're putting the nurseries out of pocket and they're putting the parents out of pocket.
So I think this is the kind of the problem here. People seem to think that, you know, when childcare costs are high, when costs for anything that is sort of important are high, people seem to think that spending more taxpayer money is actually going to solve the problem. The government this year, actually, at the budget, announced that they were going to introduce 15 to 30 hours of free childcare, obviously taxpayer-funded childcare. Actually, the majority of that is going to middle-class women who already work and are already able to afford childcare. What we need to do is allow that variability to occur, and I think that fundamentally the solution is actually look across the world where they have less child-starve ratios, potentially introduce a voucher system and give parents back that choice. I think
I have to agree on principle, and if I may make a pun, roll back the nanny state.
Yes.
You know,
children need nannies, Alex. Children need nannies.
Nannies that can communicate and speak English as well, please.
Children need good parenting. If anything, I'd rather the money was spent on training parents how to be good parents and what their responsibilities are in the 21st century, because I think a lot of parents...
But that sounds a bit nanny state.
You also sound like you don't have any
No, I would
kids.
rather do anything at all and let people get on with their lives, frankly. And I think that, you know, when you add tons of regulation onto something, eventually you out-capitalise it. It's no incentive to be in this industry. Actually, you're seeing many childcare day centres closing down because of the immense amount of regulation being forced on.
They're closing down because they don't make enough money.
And a lot of that is due to...
You know, as you say, Reem, that it is a very regulated market, and yet still we end up with pervert books being pushed onto children. So we're going to get onto that in a minute with Amy and a pervert book. But the problem is, right, that maybe I needed a nanny to...
Elocution lessons, Darren, elocution.
I actually think the problem here is really quite... You look across Europe, right, and there are examples after examples of kids being more affordable in other countries than they are in Britain, despite not being as heavily regulated. We are actually adding a burden on childcare and child rearing, and it's putting people off from being able to raise children. I mean, I know so many people who have jobs even in broadcasting who say, I just can't afford to do it.
And I think, so we sort of talk about the gender pay gap. Really, the gender pay gap is a result of women who have left work because they've not been able to afford childcare. If we want to reduce childcare costs, and if the government are serious about reducing childcare costs, they've got to cut some of that red tape.
Or they could just subsidise it better.
Well, still ahead, Amy is very annoyed indeed about the reaction to a book by a popular children's author, and she's going to tell us why shortly. But first, here's the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you weren't caught out by some of the showers that we've had around today, certainly some heavy and thundery ones, and there's a chance still of seeing a few thunderstorms to start off this evening, but for many central eastern areas they will be easing their way off as we head into the night, though persisting for western England, Wales, and some drizzly showers for parts of northern Scotland where it is going to remain relatively cloudy. Slightly cool night, towns and cities dropping down to 10, 12 degrees Celsius, but into single figures for some rural areas as we start off Sunday morning. Generally, the further east you are, the best of the sunshine you'll have first thing, bar the odd mist and fog patch early doors, but they'll all readily clear their way off. The showers in the west, though, will start to trundle eastwards as we head into the afternoon, generally persisting across the spine of the country into the afternoon. Again, some of those could be heavy. Some more persistent cloud and rain pushing into Northern Ireland later on, and that will hold temperatures back a touch around 15, 17 degrees Celsius. As we head into Monday, though, this area of high pressure in the Atlantic is going to gradually push its way into the UK, and that will help settle things down a touch. There is still going to be a little legacy of cloud, particularly for parts of central England into the day. So might be a bit of a grey one here. But either side of that, some sunny spells developing. A few showers around at times, but generally fewer compared to Saturday and Sunday. And so generally fine for those of us lucky to have the bank holiday Monday off. Further sunny spells and scattered showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hey, it doesn't sound great out there. So much for global boiling. You might as well stay with us here, eh? Especially as we're about to hear why Alex is angry about the billions of pounds in aid we've sent to India. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Your emails are coming in thick and fast as usual. Cheers very much. Regarding the calls for reparations, Janice says, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I was in Singapore and someone stopped me, recognising I was British, and said they had so much to thank us for. Reem thinks the government is to blame for the childcare crisis, but Jason says if a child can't go to the loo, write or read, it is solely down to the parents. It's got nothing to do with any government. That's what I said. Now it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's Alex, and as usual, he's angry. This week about the fact that India can afford to go to the moon and yet apparently still need billions in aid from Britain. Away you go, Alex.
Yes, Darren. Well, as he just said, India this week landed on the moon. And, you know, first of all, congratulations to India. It's an incredible achievement that only a handful of countries have ever achieved. And only a few people have ever stood on the moon, including one Armstrong. might I add. But the real matter of fact here is that the UK spent £2.3 billion in foreign aid dressed up as investments to NGOs in India over the last 4 years. Now, myself and a few others who were talking about this online, and Patrick Christie's here on GB News, received a torrent of abuse for calling out terrible British policy this week, as you can see from the lovely tweet here. Now, a lot of the responses to that tweet claimed that the money in India was being spent on radicalising Hindus and converting them to Christianity and attacking their democracy. Well, as you know, I love to do a little bit of research. So I went and looked at how that money was spent. And at least 85% of that money was spent on bringing the Indian public out of poverty, building new schools, building railways, roads, and a massive amount of other infrastructure, including creating jobs and educating them. Now, what's so interesting about that is that the Indians don't actually want this aid. Their Prime Minister rejected the aid a few years ago, all the way back in 2015. So it begs the question, if the Indians don't want this aid, then what do they want? What does India want? Well, it was very clear to me that they want more reparations from us. They want £45 trillion in reparations to Great Britain, and they also want the crown jewels. Now, globalists here like Albie and our missing friend Benjamin Butterworth this evening would tell you that these investments are worthwhile. They keep Britain a major player in the world. Well, I'll tell you this. I would rather the £12.5 billion aid that we've spent to foreign countries over the last few years goes to public schools here, trains our doctors and nurses and gives them a fair pay, hires more police officers to tackle the crime epidemic in this country, and give it back to the British people. It's been too long that the government haven't been on the side of Britain, particularly when we're in a cost of living crisis. Now, Albie, I'd love to ask you, how do you defend the actions of the Conservative government over the last 10 years?
First of all, Alex, you've tried to confect some sort of disagreement between you and I about India spending $75 million on its space mission, which actually isn't very much, by the way. It's not a very large sum of money, so I think it's impressive that India have managed to do that mission.
How
and I
much
think
have
it
you
costs.
got?
It costs well, no, but in terms of a government spending, public spending, £75 million is not a lot to get to the moon. I think it costs Russia about $200 million to do the same mission. So well done to the Indians for doing it cheaper than the Russians. But your point about globalists, yes, I am a globalist, cuff me. I do think it is important that Britain has global relationships and that we look to work with our international partners and friends to make the world a better, more prosperous and safer place.
So you're
but
saying
I
that the
agree
money...
with your point about aid going to India when they seem to have $75 million to spend on a space.
But I think you're
this is exactly my point. You can't be a globalist and say that, well, you know, it's fine for us to send aid to countries, but then, you know, when it comes to Britain being in a crisis like we are today, we can't even solve the immigration problem.
Answer me this quickly.
Why should we give a penny to any other country?
If you're not a globalist, are you a nationalist?
I am a nationalist, and I believe that Britain should be put first.
Can I just make a really crucial point? Britain are being put first because the amount we invest in India, we make more in return.
Actually, Amy, part of my research showed very, very clearly that we make no investment from this. We actually haven't gained anything back.
We literally invest into business, and which increases trade, which comes back. We make more money in return from the deals with India. Yes, we give some to NGOs to alleviate poverty in India. Oh my God, how terrible! I'd hate to support that. But overall, it is an investment worth the return.
Amy, charity starts at home. There are children living in poverty in this country. Surely before we become virtue signalling, we're sweeping in with our aid packages of money, we should resolve the issues on our own.
We're literally getting more money to support those issues at home.
I think that fundamentally
we should reallocate it.
The problem here, and I would actually say, so Alex concluded his little speech about this spending by saying that we'd prefer this money be spent in this country. I prefer the money not be taken by taxpayers at all, and I'd rather actually reduce the tax burden. We've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War. I'd rather we take that money, instead of sending it to India, give people back their tax money.
I would love that too, by the way. I think the British public deserve a tax break.
Do.
But if we are going to spend the money, which this Conservative government obviously has no control over the budget,
what about the international aid?
We might as well give it back.
What about the international aid that's gone towards tackling FGM in the Middle East and Africa, that has gone to Yemen, a war zone which actually needs...
That's not...
No, but your argument seems to be against... Your argument seems to be against international aid altogether.
And
I think
international aid that's beneficial for Britain.
It's actually spent on some very worthy causes around the world, which we should be proud
charities, Albie,
and aid is tiny.
We have
we shouldn't be proud of our budget.
Some fantastic publicly funded charities that the public will support, and that's where the aid should come from. It should be a trickle down, not a, hey, we're going to take your tax money while you're all suffering, can't even pay your energy bills.
Did you just advocate for trickle-down economics?
Send it to India or somewhere else as an investment.
What I will say is I remember a report by Reem's colleague, Christopher Snowden, where we were given money to the Chinese in foreign aid to try and get them off of salt, to try and get them to stop putting more salt on their food.
Nonsense.
It's true.
I know I'm saying that's a stupid thing to do.
Can I also tell you, you'll laugh at this, we also funded the Spice Girls in Africa. There was an African version of the Spice Girls which we sent a few million pounds to in aid. So, you know, I know we have started to change the way we do aid in this country, which is a very good thing, but it's not going far enough.
But the aid budget isn't going far enough. It's absolutely tiny. It should
get smaller.
It's quite embarrassingly small. It's like a 20th of a test and trace.
It's also
I don't think if you ask the British public whether 2.3 billion means a lot to them, I think they will agree.
But you're ignoring my point that it's coming back in return.
But I'm telling you that it's not. From the research that we've done, it's absolutely not coming.
So, Alex, would you be comfortable if international aid? Would you be comfortable if international aid stopped and, as a result, people died in Yemen?
What does it got? Albie, this is a.
Albie, would you be comfortable with that? Yes or no?
Using emotion.
Albie,
yes or no?
If that's the case, why don't we send the troops into Yemen and end the war?
Or no?
You know, like your whole argument is we should interfere. We are not the police of the world.
You can't answer the question.
Britain is in trouble.
Yes or no?
You need to look after. No, we shouldn't be sending.
You would be comfortable.
Look, you can't tell me that I'm going to kill children in Yemen and me say yes, I'm going to agree with it.
Let me come to your defence here,
Thank you,
Alex. That is not the conclusion that he is coming to. What he is saying is that
sounded like it to me.
It absolutely isn't. What he is saying.
And international aid tomorrow.
Hang on.
That is not what he said. What he is saying is that actually we need to be more careful about where this money goes. Now, what I will say is that when it comes to young girls that are facing FGM, horrible things that are at the hands of most of these authoritarian regimes, why would we want to be giving more money to those authoritarian regimes? We need to be more careful about where this money goes. I don't want to see these dictatorial individuals lining their pockets with British taxpayer money.
All right, that's a good way to end it, I think. That could have gone on, I have no doubt. Still ahead, though, it's our final debate, and we're finishing in style as Amy Nicole-Turner tells us why she's annoyed by the reaction to a new children's book called Grandad's Pride. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Your emails are flying in, and they're supporting our very own Lawrence Fox. Anne says, there's a phrase, all it takes is good men to do nothing for evil to triumph. I believe Lawrence Fox is one of the good men. Regarding our last debate on aid, Dan says, there are plenty of things we spend on which are more wasteful even than international aid. When can I expect my first journey on HS2? Well, probably in India before here, but never mind. Now it's time for our final debate. Up next, Amy is annoyed about the reaction to the book Grandad's Pride.
I am.
And she's going to tell us why. Here you go, Amy.
Well, this week, the award-winning children's author Harry Woodgate was put through the right-wing ringer. Their book, Grandad's Pride, based on their own life experiences, has been well and truly Mary Whitehoused. Commentators, like the ones alongside me, were outraged by this absolute filth, which tells the story of a bereaved grandfather and his granddaughter arranging a village pride march. They ask the local baker for a cake. They eat ice cream. There's a friendly dog called Gilbert. It wasn't quite the perverted and erotic tale promised me by my colleagues here at GB News. While it's no surprise that certain commentators don't read books, it was a shock to see a digitally altered version of the cover doing the rounds, where you could even see a little Photoshop where the hand used to be on the flag. To reduce and depict being LGBT as a kink, a fetish, to indoctrinate children really is entry-level homophobia, and it's deeply irresponsible. It's Section 28 vibes. 2023 has seen rising levels of LGBT hate incidents, and misrepresentations like this and moral panics like this fuel that fire. Have an opinion on the book, but just make it informed. Darren, no one could ever accuse you of being uninformed. Have you read the book when you were commenting on it earlier this week?
Well, you've shown me, and I can see the pervert section.
Where's the pervert section?
The BDSM, we've got it on here, haven't we?
Right, cue pervert section.
Come on, bring it up. We've got it somewhere.
Oh, I can find it here, actually. Oh, it's like, where's Wally? Right, here we are. Nestled in the background, there's a man wearing leathers.
Wearing BDSM gear.
Well, that's your interpretation.
It's on the screen now for the viewers to see for themselves.
There it is.
So would you go to nursery wearing that?
No, I wouldn't, but I would go to Pride wearing that.
Darren, look, I will put my hands up and say I commented on this earlier on this week, and I said it was a bad thing and that it was completely outrageous. And whilst I still think the graphic in there with the BDSM is inappropriate for children, it's actually not as much of a bigger deal actually seeing it in the context of the entire book, and actually that the picture that many media outlets were using was doctored. I mean,
that is
I think that's appalling.
That is
actually.
appalling.
And what's the motivation there? There's a real maliciousness.
Well, Amy, I mean, it's pretty fanciful, though, to start throwing around labels like homophobic when I'm obviously sat here as a gay man. And going through that book, there are trans flags, that horrible ideological flag there, which tells children that they need to castrate themselves and go on
Darren,
it's not appropriate for children.
Flag, the progress. I don't like the progress flag flag
Albie,
either.
if you
I
turned
don't
up
like
to a
the
nursery...
progress flag either,
Hang
but
on,
don't say
hang on.
it's telling children to castrate themselves.
Yes, it is.
This is telling children.
Yes, it is.
So
Trans
children looking
ideology
at a colourful
does that.
flag are being told
Also,
to
you say
castrate
trans
themselves.
ideology. Do you know, when I was growing up, I read a lot of books with straight characters, and I'm straight, and a lot of my friends read it, and they're gay. You won't get told your sexuality by reading a book.
If you turn up in BDSM gear to a nursery in front of children, I think you should go to prison.
That's not what's happening.
How is that? It's a children's book.
I think that we need to just bring this down here and we need to think about actually what that book represents. And it's supposed to be a sort of loving, happy story.
It is.
There is a character in there that is clearly wearing clothing that is inappropriate around children. Now, I think it's irresponsible itself to throw around accusations, calling people homophobic just because they're criticising the book. I think most people, now I'm sure there are some, most people that are criticising this book are saying that it's inappropriate for children. They are trying to protect children. Now, I think that calls to ban the book itself...
But can
I respond to Reem? And why I think this could be the thin end of the wedge is because Section 8 was prompted by a book in the 80s. It turned up in Haringey Library, and that is what kicked off the whole you can't say gay at school. That damaged a generation of children, and I just feel...
today.
But it is happening.
Before
it's already
we get Alex in...
It's happening in America, and it's soon to happen
I just want to ask you one really quick question, because you said that it's in the background, it's very small.
Yeah.
If in this book, if you were going through this book, and there was an illustration of Tommy Robinson, a little Tommy Robinson in there, and he was holding up some flag with some motto.
If you saw an England flag...
Would you say, oh, it's just small, it's in the background?
But the thing is that
would you say that?
I don't think Tommy Robinson's going to get a Little People, Little Stories anytime soon.
Well, if it did, theoretically...
If they told the story of...
wild imagination.
Wait, if I just take it back to the image. The reason I don't have a problem with the image is because...
No answer.
There is an answer.
There isn't.
Can I just interject quickly? Because I think that the original point about this debate, Amy, was that you know the image was doctored, and that's wrong. That, you know, news outlets should do a better job. We should hold ourselves accountable, do a better job of saying that. And I think we all agree that is wrong. What I will say is that there are some books that are age appropriate. I don't think that's age appropriate if it's going in nurseries, but I can see where it will fit.
So would you say that taking a child to Pride is age appropriate?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't bring a child to Pride at all. No,
but there are plenty of children at Pride.
And they shouldn't.
And they're very likely to see somebody like this.
I think parents are entitled to make a decision to take their kids to Pride.
They are, but
you were just arguing for parental choice.
But that's because you're obsessed with identity.
No, I'm not.
I'm
not. It's a celebration.
Listen,
it's a celebration. I think kids with Pride is great.
And also, it's a hard-earned celebration
Amy,
as
just
well.
to finish my point, look, children go to school to learn something, and particularly in the early years, they are very, very suggestive. I don't think any book that paints any flags or ideology of any kind should be in schools up until an age where they... However, I understand, but there's a certain age where you can start consuming this and have an objective
Can you really argue that you were all terribly influenced by Christina Aguilera's Dirty in 2002?
Not when I was 4.
S&M in 2010. We were all consuming this sexualised content.
I want to answer your question, though, Alex, because you addressed like relationship and sex education when age appropriate when they're 4. My son was about 4 years ago. I was a single parent at the time. All the families presented to him in the class were heterosexual, mummy and daddy, and he was like, why, what's our family, why is it different? And a lot of people represented in this book. There are trans parents, there are gay parents, there are lesbian parents. Everyone is represented in this book, and I think that's why this is the perfect introduction to all types of things.
And I think it's ruined by that one character. And
he's not even sad. Reem, he's not even a character.
My point is slightly different. I'd actually like to see depictions of LGBT people in society, not in Pride events, where that's
what this is. It's the history. Pride Parade, AIDS March, miners' strike.
Right, now, after that, thanks very much to all our wonderful guests tonight, but mainly to you at home, our brilliant viewers. Russell says, please keep Alexander Armstrong on GB News. Jesus, he's dreaming.
Did your mum send
Julia
that?
says, great to see Reem again, and Amy as well. What took you so long to get her on? Well, Jack has written in, and he says, Albie, what on earth just clapped me? Guess I'm not down with the kids anymore.
I'm suing him for that one.
Look it up on Urban Dictionary.
Next up, it's the brilliant Leo Kerr standing in for Mark Dolan. Cheers for watching. I'll see you again next week.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you weren't caught out by some of the showers that we've had around today, certainly some heavy and thundery ones, and there's a chance still of seeing a few thunderstorms to start off this evening, but for many central eastern areas they will be easing their way off as we head into the night, though persisting for western England, Wales and some drizzly showers for parts of northern Scotland where it is going to remain relatively cloudy. Slightly cool night, towns and cities dropping down to 10, 12 degrees Celsius, but into single figures for some rural areas as we start off Sunday morning. Generally, the further east you are, the best of the sunshine you'll have first thing, bar the odd mist and fog patch early doors, but they'll all readily clear their way off. The showers in the west, though, will start to trundle eastwards as we head into the afternoon, generally persisting across the spine of the country into the afternoon. Again, some of those could be heavy. Some more persistent cloud and rain pushing into Northern Ireland later on, and that will hold temperatures back a touch, around 15, 17 degrees Celsius. As we head into Monday, though, this area of high pressure in the Atlantic is going to gradually push its way into the UK, and that will help settle things down a touch. There is still going to be a little legacy of cloud, particularly for parts of central England into the day, so might be a bit of a grey one here, but either side of that some sunny spells developing, a few showers around at times, but generally fewer compared to Saturday and Sunday, and so generally fine for those of us lucky to have the bank holiday Monday off. Further sunny spells and scattered showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right,